Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today is going to be one of my interview series where I basically interview other collectors or artists or people in the comic community. And I basically show, you some of the other people that are in this community and get a sense of some of the collectors in this community. And today's show is going to be extra special because I have my good friend Keston that's coming back. He's been on the show on the channel many times, but this is the first real interview that I've done with him, and I'm going to grill him really hard and like make. My goal is to make him cry, and if I can succeed at that, I'll be really great. No, my goal is really to just he's going to show some really amazing books and probably make me cry. So it'll be really great. If you haven't checked out his channel, I definitely recommend his channel. It's one of the best comic related channels, bar none, on YouTube. So definitely you got to check him out. I'll put the link in the description. So without further ado, let's bring Keston in. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, Keston. Welcome to the channel.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me back.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into collecting comics.
Yeah, sure thing. And I have a box of tissues beside me here in the event these questions get too hard. Yeah, so in my daytime job, I'm a professor and an administrator at a university, and my specialty is on methodology in education. So I help create tests, collect data, analyze data, and so forth. And it also intertwines with my channel a little bit. I love thinking about GPA analysis.
Yeah.
How do you price a comic book? How many books are on census? And how do you know if you can trust the census? Those are specialties of mine.
Actually, it was really funny. I was just thinking, because you are a professor.
Yeah.
You just did a video with the price variance, like the
Yes.
UK price variance, where you did a persona as a professor. Is that your real persona? Is that the real Keston?
That's a good question. So that's not my real persona. I think how I come across as like this is more my real persona. But in that particular situation, Alan, sometimes I think about how do you address controversial issues with comic books, and the UK price variance is one of those, because there's people who really, people who really love the UK price variance, and if you say anything bad about them, I mean, they will just come with you with all their fire, being like, these books should be a lot more valuable than they are because they are so much rarer than the standard version. And so it's like, how do I address that? Because I want to like show both sides, but not really anger people. So my strategy was to come up with two personas. So I came up with one character who was from Princeton University and knew a lot about economics. It was like, this makes no sense. These books were printed in the United States. Yeah, intellectual. They were printed in the United States. The only difference between the standard version that's 12 cents and the UK price variance that's 9 pence is really the amount of money that's listed on the cover. That's it. So he's talking about it from an intellectual perspective. And then I have another character who is named Pistol McCoy, and he's from Anywhere USA. And it's like, I don't care how rare that book is. It's got some foreign currency on it, and I can't stand foreign currency. And I think in like the subconscious, a lot of Americans' mindset, people from the U.S., is that they feel that way. It's like if it's got pence on the cover,
weird. It looks like a reprint. And I think early on, it was either Overstreet or one of the guides referred to them as the UK reprint instead of the actual, just like a price variant.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've also heard it called like the UK edition as opposed to the price variant. Yeah. But I will say that through that process that I learned a lot more about the UK price variants. And I'm thinking, gosh, maybe I should collect more of them. It's something too. I know that you and your Mark, who you present with a lot, that you talk about these price variance quite a bit, and you have this big following from the UK. And so anybody who's watching this particular segment, if you're from the UK, I want to say thank you. Like a lot of the comments that folks provided, very, very knowledgeable on the UK price variance. So I learned a lot in the process.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so what I should do is, in order to get more of a global reach, is talk about all the different regions, like the Australian price variant and the Korean price. It's like,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
but yeah, so how did you get into comics? Like you, okay, obviously you're a professor. Obviously, you probably collected comics before becoming a professor. But so how did you first? What was your first foray into comics?
Yeah, I've got a story that's pretty similar to folks who are kind of in our age group,
Mhm,
mid 40s and a little bit up, is that I
mhm,
collected a lot when I was a kid. So these were books that were in a convenience store, would pick
mhm.
4 or 5 up every week and continue that for a few years. So I started back in, it was 1986 or 1987, and
Yeah.
collected pretty aggressively for 5 or 6 years. And then
Oh wow.
as I graduated from high school, which was in 1993, I would buy a book every now and then, but then it just slowed down for a long time. And I
Mhm,
always was fond of comic books and saw the comic
mhm.
book movies that came out, but it wasn't till 2012 that I really got back into collecting seriously. And the way I looked at comic books in my mid 30s was very different than
Oh yeah,
how it
yeah.
was when I was a kid, because I've got some resources and whatnot. And in fact, the what happened is I met a friend, and he and I started talking. And he was a really serious coin collector. Alan, I know you collect some coins too.
Yep. Yeah, I
And
do.
I collected coins a little bit as a kid. And he started talking. Well, if you wanted to go from spending, say $5 or $10 on a wheat penny, and you wanted to collect books or coins are actually collectible and a good investment, here's how you think about them. And so I started collecting coins a little bit, applying those same principles, and I thought, this is fun. And then I thought, you know what? I bet you these same principles would work for comic books too. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, this like rush of memories from 25 years ago came into my mind, and I thought, okay, here are the books that I just thought were unreachable as a kid, and then realized, I went on eBay. I thought, oh my god, I could actually afford some of these books, and so I started going after them. And a little bit later, I will show you the book that sort of opened up my eyes into the hobby. It turned me into a comic book collecting addict.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know you have some pretty amazing books. So yeah, so yeah, that's. Did you don't have the horror story? Like, there's always this horror story, and I like. This
Hmm,
is not on the list of questions that I normally ask, but
sure.
it's a horror story that I hear after doing all these interviews, where either the mother throws out the comics, or the girlfriend. Like in my case, it was the girlfriend that says,
Uh,
"Oh, comics are for kids. You got to sell them all." Yeah. Do you have that horror story? Or do you still have your comics from when you were a kid?
Yeah, I have just about every single one as a
Okay.
kid. I guess this is not that level of horror story where I had somebody throw out my comic books.
Hmm.
My mom did try to make me slow down a little bit, because any
Okay.
extra money I had as a kid went directly into comic
Buy
books. She's
comics.
like, you better save, it's something that's going to be worth more later on. Um,
Hmm.
but my kind of collecting horror story is that I collected Amazing Spider-Man at about issue, let's say 278, okay, is when I
Okay.
began, or
Yeah.
270 somewhere, like the
Yeah. That's like
Silver
in the
Sa-
80s. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's like Silver Sable had just come out, was a character. There's a lot of like hobgoblin stories, and I got every issue through 298.
Okay.
Then for whatever reason,
You
stopped for
stopped
a
at
couple months,
298.
and then I got like 301.
So you missed all the big ones. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I've got like 25 books before Amazing Spider-Man 300, and then like 30 books in a row right after it, and missed the big one. I mean, later on, I did go back and get
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
ASM 300. By the way, that's the first appearance of Venom, if folks don't know out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny. I actually I got like my 300. I think I bought it like cover at the time,
uh,
or and I sold it for like $50.
mm,
It's like, that was like when I listened to my girlfriend at the time, then wife. She became my wife. I don't know why I married her after her making me sell my ASM, but um, but I did. Yeah, there's a balance. Okay,
sure.
but so yeah. So how about you show some of your big books? Like, let's see what you have here.
Yeah, sure. I'll give a little bit of a backstory to this first one.
Okay.
So back in the late 80s and early 90s, I used to go through comic books and they'd have a list of all these comic books for sale from different dealers. And I was remembering the Mile High comic shop. And I may or may not be correct about this, but they're listing out different books. And there's one book that came up on top for me. And at the time it was selling for $1,000. I have no idea what grade it might have been in. But as a kid, like $1,000 might as well have been $1 million. Unfathomable amount of money. And so I kept seeing that image of the book. And I was like, I want that. So when I was making that transition from coins to comic books, this is the first book that I looked at for eBay on eBay. And
I'll make you big here. You're going to be solo.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I went on to Sparkle City. I won a bid, actually $2,500 for this book, which is a deal now. And this is
but it's a great
Amazing
book.
Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man #1 at 3.5. So I won this. Was excited when I won the auction. Then they got shipped to me over on USPS, and I remember going to the postal office there. Got the box, opened it up, and that moment when I opened it up, got this book out of the box. Like, I've never done hard drugs before, Alan, but it felt like a hit of heroin. It was like this just rush of pleasure just went through my mind.
Because it's such a big book. I mean, that's a huge book.
Yeah, it was something like, I'll show it again. It's something where this book was ingrained in my head as this Grail as a child. And then to finally achieve it, dozens of years later, just made me so happy. And so this is the book that gave me that first huge high that I've been chasing ever since.
It's weird. It doesn't look like a 3.5. It looks, I don't see any major flaws. Am I mistaken in that, or like?
Yeah, I'm looking at, so it's got a little bit of Marvel chipping. It may be due for a press because it's a little bit nicer than that.
Case, I can see.
Yeah, it's
which would mean that it's probably not pressed.
It may not be, because I bought this back in 2012, and this is before people were pressing a lot. I mean, pressing was out there, but it wasn't too frequently. But yeah, the idea was that Fantastic Four was the big hit at the time. And so Marvel was really great at this, is that they would put really successful characters with newer characters to kind of hype up the book. And it didn't take very long for Spider-Man to be the sort of the king of the Silver Age into Marvel. But yeah, this is a really cool cover.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great one. So yeah, I mean, that, just so people know, that book, you paid $2,500 for it. Now it's like a $15,000 book, somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to say, as you know, Alan, that the market got, in my opinion, too hot in the last couple of years. And that book went from being, say, probably $7,000 2 years ago to being more like sales of 14, 15, 16,000. And the market's cooling back a little bit. I mean, it is
I noticed that too.
Yeah, it is an all-time like Silver Age Grail. It's up there in the top, whatever, 5 or 6 books. But yeah, I get scared when any kind of investment goes up 30, 40, 50%, 100% in a year.
In 1 year.
Yeah. And a lot of those Silver Age keys have just, absolutely exploded. So even though, like, hey, I don't want to say the market's too hot because we've got a lot of comic books, but even still, just being like realistic and truthful to the audience, I was like, let them cool down a little bit, and it might be a good time to buy in, a few months or a year or two.
Yeah, that's what I've been finding. Okay, so let's see your next book.
All right. So what that book did to me is it got me excited about other Silver Age books, and I went after just about all of them. I don't have them all. I had to trade them in for some other books, but I have a couple of nice other Silver Age keys I'd like to show. And this is one of my favorite covers, and it is, let's see if I can get this in here. So it's Tales of Suspense, number 39, and this is the first Iron Man. What I enjoy about this cover is how primitive Iron Man looks in that sort of V1 of his suit.
I always love that, like that homemade look.
It is very homemade. And also, this is a Kirby cover. And also, like, he's saying, like, who there. And it reminds me of those like early monster covers that he was doing just a few years before that. So So yeah, this is one of my favorites, and I've had a few copies of this. This is the only one that I have with me today. Alan, it's a little embarrassing to say, but I used to have a 9.2 white pager of this
Oh,
book.
wow.
Yeah, I traded it for a Golden Age key. I don't have it. Steering Mystery Comics #1, same grade, 9.2. But yeah,
Oh, wow.
I really love it. And for a time, I didn't have any copies, which was really felt naked to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you could trade that comic for a house.
Yeah, probably so. You're right. You're right. But yeah, this one I bought since I bought a little bit later, say 2018. I think I bought it for like $3,000,
That's not
and
bad. That's a pretty good
yeah,
price.
pretty good. And yeah, some copies have been selling for $8,000 or $10,000 recently.
Yeah, I actually, when I bought that book, I paid 5,000 Canadian, which is about
Okay.
3,000, 3,500 for it.
Yeah.
But it's restored, and it's a high grade restored. You know what I mean? Like it's the restoration on it drives me crazy. You know how at the very bottom of the page of the book, somebody cut like just this much, like just like a little bit, like a little trim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it just like that much and maybe like a millimeter. So it's restored. So, but yeah, it kills the value. But
yeah,
great book. I love that book. That's one I could have gotten so cheaply at one point, and I missed out on it. But yeah,
yeah.
that's a great
By the
book.
way, that's an interesting conversation, maybe for a little later time. But that idea of trimming and that there's all types of restoration, right? You know, color touch, you can support the spine in a number of ways, you know, blah, 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 glue. But trimming, that is the worst in terms of investor's mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of understand that because I guess the philosophy is that you're actually removing something away from the book in order to increase its value, and you can never undo that. But yeah, people are really harsh when they price trimming. And so you can have a book that looks great, like no other restoration otherwise.
Yeah.
As you say, it might just be one, might just be the bottom that's trimmed. And all of a sudden, in mid-grade, that book is worth maybe a third of what it would be worth if it were unrestored.
It kills the value.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sad. Okay. I'll get you to show some more books.
Okay, great. All right, next one. And so this, of course, is a big book. It's Amazing Fantasy number 15. It's the first appearance of Spider-Man from 1962. It's a Kirby cover, Stan Lee's story, of course, and one of the, I shouldn't say one of, I think it is the major grail of the Silver Age. And like some of the other books I had a couple other copies that I sold like as an idiot. And then I bought them really cheap way back in the day. And I went back, and I think this was around 2018 as well, 2019. I bought this book for, I think it was just a shade under $20,000.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, at the time I didn't have a copy.
Oh, it was actually pretty expensive even back then.
Yeah, so yeah, right, 3 or 4 years ago. This is like it started spiking up, and then prices on this book in particular have been just nutty. And we've had like I think 2.0 sold for $40,000.
Yeah. It's pulled back since. Actually,
it has pulled back. Yeah,
around 25, 23. For a 2.0.
I think so, and it's gone back to more like $10,000 a point as opposed to $20,000 a point. That's also something that, if you're thinking about like investment tips, one thing that I've noted, and a few other folks too, like Ryan from Automatic Comics has talked about this, is there being this like compression in prices at the lower end of the scale. Yep. And so people want to get into, actually, you want to go to the two of us on screen, Alan?
Yeah. So I've noticed that as well, that there's always that price compression at the lower grades. And it allows you to really shift up very easily. So, you know, you get your entry level book, and then you can say, okay, I'll trade you my entry level book for your entry level book, and then kind of like work your way up, where you can, give them a couple $100 or a few $100 and actually trade up. That's what I've been looking into more and more lately.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so people want a copy of these Silver Age Grail so badly that it's extremely competitive at the lower end of the condition spectrum. And so they'll throw in, say, $15,000 or $20,000 for 0.5 or a 1.0 Amazing Fantasy 15. And it's anywhere from kind of that 2 range down is like super competitive. But then you just go up a little bit, a 3 to a 3.5, it might only be, say, 30% more expensive.
Yes.
And that's in contrast to the way it, I wouldn't say should work, but traditionally works, is it should be a linear progression by points.
Just as you said, 10,000 per point or something, like where you can say, okay, it's like, it's just steady going up.
That's right.
But what I've noticed is there's actually 2 price points, like up to about almost a 3, maybe 2.5, 3, that range. There's like a huge amount of compression.
Yep.
And then then it's sort of kind of almost like the same price, like very little price difference after the 3s. And then once you hit a 6, boom, it jumps up again. And then again, it jumps up again at 8. And then it, goes crazy once you get in the 9s. But my point is, like, there's that weird jump at a grade of a 6. I don't know why, but there's that, like, a 5.5 and a 6, a huge difference between the 2. And I've noticed that consistently, which would be kind of not logical, because you'd think it should be linear, but it isn't. It really isn't.
Yeah. So I've got a bit of a response to that. And I may make a video on this too, because it's interesting, but it's a little esoteric. But the idea is that, you got these sort of typical price structures. And for like Silver Age and Golden Age books, the typical price structure is it has been linear up to about a 6 or a 6.5.
Yeah.
And then it starts going up exponentially after that. Yeah. Now, I think sort of the rationale for that is the rarity and condition as you start getting high. And so, and many of the Silver Age books follow this like wonderfully, in that, you have, a lot of books, in each of the grades up till about a 6 or 6.5, but especially as you start going up to like 8 and, 9 and above. So try to get AF 15, for example, at a 9 or above. I think there's about like 20 copies maybe total.
Yeah.
Which really makes, rare. So there's like 3,600 on census total, and only 20 at that nosebleed section. And that's why you get people spending hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in those, in that 9.4, 9.6 level.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. That always made sense. I always thought those high grade books, in a way, one of the things that I like about it, those high grade ones, is that, you see this book and it's $1 million book,
right.
Amazing Fantasy 15 is like a $3 million book.
Sure.
But the great thing is you can still get into that book at a low grade. And well, not really even now. Nowadays, maybe even that is not possible. You can maybe get into a page like nowadays. But it's become crazy expensive. But I always, that's why I was always a low grade collector. Because I like the idea that, I could get in on a big book. Because
that's right.
With low prices, there's still some, room to buy them. But
funny enough, I consider AF 15 to be like analogous to the Mickey Mantle rookie card if you're a baseball collector, because the same thing, like you can get into a Mickey Mantle rookie card for thousands of dollars. It's not cheap to get in, but it's to folks who have been around for a while, can scrap a little money together. It's obtainable. But you start getting into those high grades, and then it becomes a multi-million-dollar card.
Yeah. I've heard like 5 million or something crazy for like a high grade one. Yeah,
that's right. And Alan, if I may too, something else I thought about with that pricing. Notice that I said that sort of linear up to a 6.5 and exponential for Silver and Golden Age books.
Yeah.
Because that structure just doesn't hold up for modern books as well. And the reason being is that, after, let's say 1970 and beyond, especially,
people bagged and boarded everything.
People bagged and boarded things. And so that conditional rarity in high grade just doesn't play out. You probably have as many
Yeah.
9.4, 9.6, 9.8 copies as there are copies that say a 2.0, and maybe
I know
more, just because so
it's
many people
actually
beg
funny.
for
Like
them.
the low grades are actually rarer. Like, not that you'd want to collect the low grades,
Yeah.
but if you get like some modern book that just came out,
Yeah,
like how many like 2.0 copies are there out there? It's like, and
that's
nobody
right.
would get those graded.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Death of Superman in a 1.0. Yeah, you're not going to find that book on eBay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so it's a little different, but
Right.
yeah, well, that's one thing that people don't really understand is like I see these modern books, and there's like 2,000 9.8s or something insane.
Right.
It's
Right.
And you compare that to some golden age books, or even silver age. 2000 is actually the full census usually,
Yeah.
and there's just none at that 9.8 usually. So
Yeah,
yeah.
people
So
get
do you
mad at
have
me.
any more books? Are you going to show some golden age? Or are you
I'm going to
going
show Golden Age. Yeah.
to? Okay.
So I just finished my thought that people get mad at me because I posted a video saying like Deadpool's not rare. And that's New Mutants 98. It's a great book, by the way. And I love Deadpool, but there are over 4,000 copies in
Exactly.
9.8, right? And that's in contrast to some Golden Age books that you and I have that there might be only like 40 copies altogether. In fact,
Yeah.
I believe I added up every single copy on census of the top 100 Golden Age books, and
Hmm.
it's something like 7,000 books altogether in
Really?
all grades, right? And so
Wow.
you're talking about like 9.8s in New Mutants 98
98.
has, it's pretty comparable, just the 9.8s compared to all grades over all 100 Golden Age books. So with that being said,
Wow.
let me show you a sweet Golden Age book. And I promised viewers that I would show some fire. And this is one of the bigger books I got.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this is Captain America Comics #1, the Golden Age book. This is from 1941 and actually predated the U.S.'s involvement in the war. It's got that cover that's among the most famous covers in the hobby, right? So you got Captain America hitting Hitler in the jaw,
Can you zoom
and
in, like show people that punch? That's an awesome
oh
punch.
yeah, yeah. So there it is,
Look at that.
boom,
That's just so awesome.
yeah. And in the back there's a TV, and there it shows it's like the U.S. ammunition supply.
Oh, I
So
never
the
saw that before. I never knew about that. That's cool.
Yeah. So the idea is like, okay, we want to the Nazis are plotting about how can we destroy this, right? And so Cap is
Oh,
like,
wow.
no way. And then you've got Bucky there. And you got the old shield, right? So this is the
Yep.
only issue that the sh-
Old shield.
the heater shield shows up. Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I
And
always love that book. That's a really great book.
yeah. So I really like that. And it's also this collaboration between um, Simon and Jack Kirby, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby on the cover. And people often think about Jack Kirby as being Silver Age arts, which of course he was, and he did a lot of the
Mhm.
covers of the big Marvel Silver Age keys. But he was in the game for a long time. Actually, Kirby, I think, was a few years older than Stan Lee, which made
Mhm.
sense because I think Stan Lee got to start in Captain America Comics #3 a couple of
Yeah.
issues later. But Kirby, his first work was in like 1937 or 1938 on comic books. So Kirby actually started work on comic books before Superman ever came out. So it gives you
Wow.
an idea of like how
That's so
long he
crazy.
worked in the
Yeah,
hobby.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Kirby is kind of one of the gods of comics in a way, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's really
people
fun.
really associate Kirby with like Fantastic Four and stuff like that. It's really kind of where actually it's funny if you look at Kirby's signature because he really did become associated with a Fantastic Four. He actually makes a four in the way he makes his letter.
I did not know that.
So,
That's great.
yeah, actually when he signs things, it's always got the four in it. It's kind of weird.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And up to this point, the books I've been showing have been extremely mainstream. And
Hmm.
that's how I began. I began going after these like grails of books that I knew as a child and went after them.
Hmm.
And this was one of the first books, Captain America Comics #1, that got me into the Golden Age. And you and I actually have a video on that
Hmm.
about why to collect Golden Age. But what I realized was how much harder these books are to get.
Oh yeah.
Because I believe that it's like just under 200 books on census for Captain America Comics #1. And that's
Wow.
in comparison to like 3,600 copies for Amazing Spider-Man 15. So in
Yeah,
order
it's
of,
not even comparable.
yeah, it's not even comparable. It's so, I thought, gosh, these are hard to get and they're fun because
Mhm.
relatively speaking, there's a lot more attention to the Silver Age, but you can get some really cool things. And then this is about the time when my collecting got weird.
Okay.
So I think that many of us in the hobby who have kind of come back to it, if you spend a lot of time on books, you start like going into these weird niches.
Rabbit
And
hole, kind of like, yeah, ways of collecting. Like,
yeah, I
yeah.
kind of think about it like folks who are real music heads that they're like,
Mhm.
I don't want to listen to anything that's on the regular radio. I want to listen to these like bands that only insiders know.
Yeah, 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 really obscure, like really,
Real,
like, yeah.
yeah,
Maybe
really.
5 people know this one band.
Yeah, that's right. It could be applied to a lot of different things, like
Mhm.
alcohol, right? So people are like, I would never try a Bud Light.
Yeah,
Now I
yeah,
just drink sours or whatever it might be. But
yeah, yeah.
you kind of get into those weird areas. And so that's what I did. This is one of those books that sort of took me from the mainstream to start getting me a little bit off.
Mhm.
And this is a great book.
Oh wow,
This is
that's now mainstream because of the movie.
Oh, that's true. That is true. It
But
is.
that's
It's
a
kind
great
of
cover.
a Yeah, it's kind of a link between the mainstream and a little bit obscure. And it's
Mhm.
Submariner. And what's weird about Submariner as well is that he was super mainstream back in the 40s. So he was one of
Yeah.
Timely, which would later become Marvel, one of Timely's big three with the Human Torch, Captain America, and Submariner. But Submariner became a more, per se, out of favor in the last few decades. But this is Submariner Comics number 11 from 1943. And I do like Subby, but this cover is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I love
And
that cover.
yeah, and this has got me into this like strange kick on Alex Schomburg. So Alex
Mhm.
Schomburg the um, was the cover artist who put out the most covers in the Golden Age. So he did 600 covers, something
Oh wow,
unbelievable
I
during
didn't
that
realize it
decade.
was that much.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, super prolific and known for his art. So people can debate who the best cover artist was in the Golden Age. To me, it's not a debate. I'll go with Alex Schomburg um, every day of the week. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of collectors out there now, and Alan, you and I are among them who
Mhm.
sometimes just buy books for the great covers. So this is kind of a nice
Yeah, of
bonus
course.
because it's a cool character. But you got these flames coming out the nostril of the dragon, and the woman in peril in the jaws. And something interesting about this too is I always wonder how the heck did he get in that pose, right? It's like he got to back up to get into the jaws of the dragon.
Well, the funny thing is, you mentioned this book before,
Yeah.
and actually, I thought about it. I was thinking what had happened is they were both eaten, okay, and he's gotten out. He's pushed his way out, and he's like, "Ah, finally, I'm out," kind of thing. I think that's what happened. That's my explanation, my scientific explanation for that cover.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't really make sense the way it is, but I think that's the only way it could make sense.
Yeah. It looks great though. So I
It looks
absolutely love
cool.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I always love women in peril, and
Yeah.
Schomburg, he is the master of women in peril
Yeah.
covers. It's just I just love his covers, and it's
Yeah.
usually like the trope with Alex Schomburg, and I always mention this, is that he's not only master of women in peril, but the useless hero. The hero is like totally not in the right place at the right time. He's like totally off screen. He's like it's the woman is the focus, and like the
Yeah.
hero is in the background, and he's like 10 minutes too late to save the woman. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I always love that. But
And the other thing I would add a third piece of that, and it's the sidekick who's the liability. Because oftentimes you have a sidekick. Now the idea is that both the hero and the sidekick had worked together, but it is covered. It's often the sidekick is like chained up, and so
he's
the
usually
hero's got to
chained
waste
up
his
with the
resources on.
woman in peril.
Yeah, right, right.
It's like both of them are chained up. It's like, oh man, can you help?
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well, kind of interesting a transition from that, like women in peril. some later work in the 1940s actually shows these like really strong women. And I love these covers, and my wife does as well. And this is not an Alex Schomburg comic book. And Alan, you've seen this from before. It is Seven Seas Comics, #4 by Matt Baker. And if you're looking for like great art on a Golden Age comic book, gosh, this has got to be in the top 5 in my opinion. I mean, it's just a masterpiece. And so you have the hero here, and she's in this water. You got a shark coming up, and the waves are just unbelievable. So this is one of the most beautiful books that I own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the people that don't know, Matt Baker is considered to be one of the greats of the Golden Age. And Seven Seas and Cinderella Love would be the other one, but Seven Seas definitely is considered to be his like most best examples of his work. Another thing that people don't know is, for some reason, I don't know why this is, but if you put a shark on a Golden Age cover, it just triples in price. It's like there's like shark collectors out there or something. I don't know. Always the shark covers are the most expensive. It's crazy. Did you?
Yeah, yeah, it's really, yeah, you're right. So there's certain like motifs that just drive collectors wild. Underwater, especially with sharks, is great. Yeah. Also, like I'll call it like the stormtrooper effect, that oftentimes it's like the villains in movies like Darth Vader are really popular. And so in these 40s books, it's the hooded menace, right? And so there's a lot of like how do you know that person's bad? It's because they're wearing a hood and they tried to shoot Bucky in the head.
Yeah, there's so many hooded figures, especially Schomburg was famous for that, the hooded figure. Did you bring a hooded figure Schomburg book?
I didn't today. Okay,
there's a book that I know that you have.
Yeah.
That maybe you have to do a special. I think you have a special video on your channel where you show it.
Right? I do, yeah. And I'll reveal it's called Suspense Comics #3, and it's one of the most famous. It's actually the most valuable non-superhero comic book that there is. Yeah, just really interesting art, and the idea is that it's they're trying to make the Germans. It's the middle of World War II, trying to make the Germans look as evil as possible. It's like, well, how do you do it? Well, you put hoods over their heads and you make the swastikas very prominent on their outfits, and you have them sacrificing a woman. Like, you do all that, it's going to look pretty crazy. And it's a really rare book too. There's about 40 total that have been graded. Yeah, so that's a cool book. I've got a separate video on that. So if you were to go on YouTube and put in Suspense Comics 3, I think it's the first thing that pops up.
Yeah, I mean that was a great video. I mean, you're really making fun of some of the hero elements in it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely everyone should check that video out. So yeah, do you have any more to show?
I've got one more, and so another thing about me that is, I guess, interesting and also is really expensive is not only do I like Golden Age books that are rare, I like them in high grade. And so this book is a bit of a culmination of all the elements that I like. So it's a book from 1948. It's Winter Comics #16. And this is an Alex Schomburg cover 2 later in his career as a comic book cover artist. And this particular book, it's, I would say, like a really minor key in Golden Age, but what makes it special is that grade in 9.6. So this is tied with 2 others as being the highest graded for this particular book. And it also has got the gold label here. It is part of the Promise Collection. And I know many of the viewers know that the Promise Collection is a very recent pedigree that came out through Heritage over the last few years. Let me see if I can, there you go. That came out over Heritage over the last few years, and just unbelievably nice comic books with these grades that rival the Mile High collection. And so, so it's like, okay, this is a Schomburg book. It is a strong woman airbrush cover. It's pedigreed. It's got great page quality. It's like, again, endorphins are just rushing in my head when I think about
it's an awesome book.
Yeah,
it has a fatal flaw, though.
What's that?
It's the guy that's in bondage, not the girl. just a small flaw, but
Well, see, you know, some ways I'm thinking that like it might be Alex Schomburg trying to atone for his way of depicting women back in the early 40s,
Mhm.
because as you said, it was like in the early 40s, it was always like woman chained up, woman in
Yeah.
the jaws of a dragon. You know, she's in
Mhm.
peril big time, and it's like, please help me. Later on, he started doing these covers that are
The
like,
woman
hey,
in power.
these women are kicking some ass, and they're
Yeah, yeah.
you know saving their poor hapless dude in the background. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
funny. When the women are doing the saving, they're in the foreground.
yeah.
When it's the men doing the saving, they're in the background. It's weird how that works. Um,
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're so right. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and it's
So
also too, which I appreciate. It's like she's actually like in control. It's like she's going to
yeah,
win on the front of this
yeah,
cover,
yeah. And
and the other
that's
was
Tara, right? Her name's
yeah,
Tara.
Tara. That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And in contrast, in the earlier books, usually it's the hero is like you said, way in the background, and it's like, why is
Mhm.
he even there?
It's
There's
so
no way
useless.
he's going to win. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And usually he has like a sword versus like a whole bunch of guys with guns or something. It's like something totally outpowered, or spear. He like will have a spear or
that's
something.
right.
Something silly.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, that those are really great books. What's the next great book that you're hunting?
Whew, yeah. Well, I'll give you a little background on my situation too. So, um, in 2012, I was a single person. I had been working as a professional for a number of years, and I was still living like a bachelor. So, you know, living a
Hmm.
pretty frugal life. So, you know, I was saving money. Where was that money going into? Comic books.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so folks who are familiar with your channel, like I was living like the Allen lifestyle. Like every month, all these books come in, you know, big unboxings, and then
Mhm.
in about 2017, so 5 years later, fortunate enough to get married and actually have my spouse is very supportive of collecting, but
Oh, that's cool.
it's kind of like you know the budget is a lot smaller than it used to be, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you know I do get you know a couple books you know every month, but they're on the you know smaller side. However,
Mhm.
I still go after some big books, but it causes me to cannibalize my collection. So the question
Mhm.
really now is if I'm going after big books, it's like I must really like them because I'm gonna have to sacrifice you know two or three other ones to get it. So kind of
Mhm.
in that mindset, Alan, something that I've always wanted has been a copy of Marvel Comics #1, and
Okay.
maybe even a restored copy might be nice. So if the right copy came about, I might sell quite a few books in order to get that. Um, and and I think Tech 27 and Action One are out of reach for me, even for the restored copies. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, it's Marvel One that I love Marvel. I love Timely, and to me, that's the
Well, to me, Marvel One is actually kind of like of the. I would say it's one of the top three books
yeah,
of
sure,
the golden age, or of all ages, I should say, because it's the one that launched Marvel, and it is like a cool cover. It's like the flaming torch coming through the wall, and it is a very iconic book in my opinion. There's
yeah. I don't want
actually
anybody
an
to.
auction coming up.
What's that?
I
Okay,
actually just got this in the mail,
okay.
but it's probably like when we air this, who knows? But I think they actually have like an action one and all this kind
Hmm.
of stuff, high grades but restored. So they're going to be like a fraction of the
Right.
price probably. But I think they actually have some early Marvel comics as well.
Okay.
So you might
Yeah.
want to check that out.
Yeah. So what was fascinating to me is that I mean it's hard to say that a book that's going to be even in low grade or restore grade is going to be like low six figures that's a deal. But if
Mhm.
you're comparing it against some of the other like mega keys in the hobby, then I do think it's still a great value. And here's why. So like Action One and Tech 27 are just a league in their own. They're just so
Yeah.
much more expensive than everything else. And then kind of the next grouping would be Marvel One, Batman One, and Superman One.
Yeah.
And again, I love Bat One and Soup One, but they're they're not the
They're
first
the B
appearances of
tier
those.
of the books, actually.
Yeah, and like Marvel 1 is rare, is the rarest of all those books, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it's kind of like I would think that Marvel 1 would be closer in value to Action 1 and Tech 27 than to Bat
Mm-hmm.
1 and Soup 1. But the reason I like it's not really because of the value. I mean, I just want a copy of that book, but it just kind of strikes me as being funny. Now, at different times over the last 50 years of the collecting hobby, Marvel 1 has been considered the most valuable book of the entire hobby. And so it's like, could it come back to that? Maybe.
It's kind of one of those things where like those books, they just don't come up that often.
Yeah.
So whenever one does,
yeah,
it's the record, it's the top, it's the top book.
Yeah.
It's kind of more like that situation, I find.
Yeah.
Because like, how often do you see Marvel 1? I mean, maybe every 5 years, something like that. You'll see a Marvel 1 come up for auction.
Not
and
often.
A high grade, that's another layer to it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then Action 1 and Detective 27 are the same way. They don't, and whenever they do come up, even like I think a 6.0 recently sold for over $1 million. Like was it over $1 million for Detective 27 came up? Wasn't it?
So there's an Action 1 that came up that was a 6.0 that was a rocket copy that
sold
for I think it was
that's the one I was thinking about.
It was a hair over $3 billion for a 6.0.
Yeah.
A really cool copy. And the other thing that this is not it's Superman related, but that copy of Superman #1 at an 8.0 sold for $5 million.
Yes.
And I want to share with
that was actually an auction where not an auction, but it was like a private sale.
That's right. Yeah, there's a private transaction that occurred, and there have been whispers about it. And CGC actually posted the announcement that they confirmed that indeed this book sold for that much. Now, one thing I want to clarify with people, because I think some people are saying, now it's Superman #1 that's the most valuable comic book in the hobby. No. What Superman can say is that right now a particular copy of that book sold for the most that's ever been recorded. Mm-hmm. But I think if you put all the Action 1, the first appearance of Superman, compared to Soup 1 across grades, Action 1 is still going to sell for quite a bit more. And another thing about that particular Superman copy, which makes it unusual, is that right now on Census with Superman #1, the highest graded copy is an 8.5, and then this is an 8.0, and the 8.0 that sold is the Mile High copy. And so people will pay more for the privilege of owning a book from the most famous pedigree that there ever was. I mean, so it's a great book. I'm just saying that if it wasn't the Mile High copy, it probably wouldn't have sold for $5 million. And the fact that there's to my knowledge, there's no book known that's a 9.0 or higher for that book makes the 8.0. It makes it sound like Superman 1 as a series or as a particular issue is worth more than it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's kind of weird with that book. Oh, you froze, but
yeah, I'll get back on there.
Yeah, I'll once you get back. What's really weird about that book, the Soup 1, is that I heard that it was one of these books where the owner of it was just holding on to it and just never getting it graded. And I think it was actually a higher grade. And just from being held and one of these books that was in like a personal private collection, it lost a little bit of the grading. So it probably was in the 9s when it was in the Mile High, but then over the time of being in this private collection, it kind of lost a little bit of the grade.
Right.
Keston, are you able to get your video back? Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I just did.
Okay, good. So we almost lost Keston. He ran off to go buy a Soup 1.
Oh shoot. Well, hey, it looks like I'm fading out here. So
yeah, your internet connection. So what we'll do is, Keston, when you're not disappearing, where do people find you? And tell us a little bit about what you're doing quickly.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Keston's Old School Comic Books. And recently I've been looking a lot into comic book rarity. And so if you're interested in finding out more about that, then yeah, check me out. And Alan, I'm sure we'll be doing a collaboration before too long. So I will have Alan as a guest at some point as well.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Keston, for coming on the
Yeah.
show.
And sorry for just having that weird W in my box. Hopefully next time I'll be live in my real face. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So again, thanks, Keston, for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed this interview series. Keston, and you got to check out his channel. I'm going to put the link in the description. Go over there, check him out, subscribe to his channel. Definitely worth it. Lots of really great information, especially about some of these books that you just don't see. And you got to go over there, check it out. I really enjoyed his series on Action One and some of the finds, some weird finds of Action One, and some of the stories of like the Nicolas Cage one was really good as well. So there's some really great stuff over there on his channel. I recommend you watch his videos. Um, if you want to be part of this interview series, I recommend that you put a comment below, and maybe you might be featured in a future episode. So I'm always looking for people to interview, and yeah, I hope that this becomes a way that we can kind of build the community and get to know some of the members of the comic community. So thanks again for everyone for watching, and bye for now.